So it's now my job to introduce our next speakers. And I'm going to shortly ask Sir Kenneth Olisa to come up to the stage. Kenneth's Chairman of Restoration Partners, also His Majesty's Lord Lieutenant. He's the founder and chairman of boutique technology merchant bank Restoration Partners. And his technology career spans 40 years. Today, he chairs a portfolio of high-potential technology businesses. He'll be in conversation with Michael Heyman. Michael Heyman, a great friend to the programme, is co-founder of Seven Hills, and he's actually chair of the Small Business Charter. So, Sir Ken and Michael.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Good morning. Morning.
And I suppose the first thing we could say is follow that.
Yes,
Richard was
yes.
brilliant, right? I mean, did we all think that? I thought it was a real masterclass. And I think, where can we go after foxes and hedgehogs but to mad entrepreneurs, actually? Because, and I say mad because, Kenny, you've got a view about mad entrepreneurs, haven't you? Which I've been reading this morning. Tell us about it.
Well, we've just seen one. We've just seen one. What a brilliant presentation. And what an inspiring moment for this country, where we start to think you can do things like that in the country, as opposed to the doom and gloom that we hear all the time. But as you say, I've, for the last few years, certainly the Restoration Partners years, I've spent my time, which is about 25 years, I've spent my time advising mad entrepreneurs. I'm sure not all of you are mad here, but many of you will be. And I draw a distinction between a mad entrepreneur, if I may, and a small business person. There's nothing wrong with being a small business person, but you are destined to be a small business person, and that's not going to grow very much at all. It might keep food in your children's mouths and so on, which is, of course, very important, especially if your children eat, but it's much more important that we grow the economy, and we do it by following the footsteps of the chap who just presented to us. And he's clearly a mad entrepreneur. Mad, I have to say, hastily, because now neurological negatives are a reason to be fired from places. MAD stands for Mission Addicted Disruptor.
Phew, I'm glad we got that.
And what I've observed, I'm sitting next to one as well, what I observed is that there's a kind of business person who's got an obsession with changing the planet. And whatever that obsession is, they may not be able to articulate it, they may never have told anybody, but it absolutely drives everything that they do. And we've just, as I say, observed somebody like that. So
yeah.
yes, mad entrepreneurs
and
it
makes it mission addicted. I mean, Richard was somebody that he never lost focus, even on the questions. I don't know if, obviously I do a lot of interviewing, and it's interesting that quite often when you go into Q&A, a speaker will wander off the points they're making.
Okay, don't criticise me.
No, I mean, it was early, yeah. We've still got half an hour to go. But I mean, but in terms of that sort of that tension and that tightness and that staying on mission, I mean, I think is that something you can learn, or is that something that is just unique to people like we've just
No, you can absolutely learn it. I mean, I would say that anyway, given the context of today, but you can absolutely learn it. And in fact, he just said it, didn't he? He said, the danger is you drift away from your purpose. So actually, just stay focused on it. And there are lots of reasons to drift away from your purpose. Cast your mind back to university. I was at my old college the other day, and we were talking about the library. In my college, you went to the library to get a book, and you went back. It was a horrible room. Then you went back to your room to study. Actually, by the time you go back to your room, you'd passed at least 500,000 more interesting things to do than to study. And in your room, there are another 500,000 things. So actually, staying focused on study was really difficult. The same is true with business. Old people like me give you advice about what you should do, and you think, well, I was going to do that, but I'll drift off the... No, as Richard just said, stick to it. Because, but the it isn't the business. It isn't the business model. It's something here. It's in your heart. And that's my point about the mission addiction point. You're trying to change the world for the better. You've got some ideas that you know will make the world a better place. Stick to those, despite the fact that your lawyer, your accountant, your spouse, etc., will all tell you why it's stupid, you should stop it, get a proper job, and. Just stick to that.
No, it's very interesting. I mean, I suppose reflecting on the title of this morning, Building Your Pathway to Success, I mean, it's I suppose on the one level, success can be a very subjective point. I mean, I thought that last question was very interesting about, what is success on your own terms? But also the pathway. I mean, your life, I'd like you to frame it for us, Ken, because, I mean, everybody who looks at you now will see somebody who is His Majesty's Lord Lieutenant in Greater London. Yes, very, doing things at an incredible level. You've done things as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as a philanthropist. It all looks like it was destined to be, but I know your story and I know the journey that you've been on, and there have been many, many forks in the road in terms of how you arrive at today. I mean, how might you characterize that? How might you share that with an audience in terms of what's a learnable lesson, do you think, from your life?
One of the things that I do is I started a small charity about a dozen years ago to help people who've got the same sort of background that I have. I call it tough reality background, single parent in the back streets of Nottingham, in poverty and now, as you say, and as we probably will keep repeating, the King's representative in London. And I show a picture in my charity. We've got these young people, early 20s generally, and we're giving them this message that they can do, well, they can fulfill their potential. They can't do anything, but they can fulfill their potential. And I have a slide which has a picture of me with lots of members of the royal family and other things that I do. And then I have another, next slide is the house I grew up in, which is a horrible, it probably still is, but was a horrible 2 up, 2 down, damp rental property with outside lavatory, no inside plumbing. So I've got this picture of Ken and the monarch, and then a picture of the outside lavatory, etc., at the bottom of the slide. And I draw a line between the two, and I say the big question is, how do you get from there to there? And the big question mark. And then on the next slide I say, actually, but that isn't how you get there, because the line looks something like that. And I think the biggest message to answer your question is, it isn't a straight line, it isn't about privilege, it's about sticking to it, as you just heard, and course correcting when things go wrong. And the other thing I would say, and I say this at length to the younger people, the other thing I would say is when things go really well, it's partly down to your talent and it's partly down to luck. And when things go badly, it's partly down to your failed decision to do something or find yourself in the wrong circumstances, and it's also down to bad luck. And so there's no point in blaming anybody because it's only partly other people, and there's no point in blaming yourself because it's only partly yourself. Just get on with it, which again was the message we just heard.
Right. You also said it doesn't matter where you start from, it's where you want to try to get to that makes the difference. When did it start to occur to you in your life journey where you were trying to get to? And in fact, did you ever get there?
So I had an epiphany. I was working for a computer company, and I was a sales manager. And I have to say the worst job I've ever had in my life was a sales manager. Because basically, as a sales manager, to all the people who are over goal, you say, oh, Michael, it's so good to see you this morning. I'm so glad you're over goal. Is everything okay? Can I do anything to help you? And all the people under goal, you say, look, you've got 1 month. You can't say that anymore. It was a little bit more brutal the days when I was doing this. But you say you've got 1 month to survive in this job as I'm firing you. So there was nothing intellectual about it. There's nothing constructive. It was basically slave labor, whipping people or praising people. And I sat in my cold office one morning, Monday morning, miserable, fed up. I'd had a row at home with my wife. I'd driven in, the traffic was crap, the office was freezing cold because in those days you didn't turn the heating on until early Monday morning. It was scything rain down the window, and a little imp popped up on my shoulder and said, so what happened to that bright young Cambridge graduate that was going to change the world? I punched the thing and it just still looked at me and again. I thought, actually, I don't know. I mean, why am I doing a horrible job? Imp pops back up and said, why are you doing this stupid job? So I know the answer to that question because I wanted to be the managing director of this company called Wang Laboratories. So I said that to the imp, and the imp said, why? Well, because it was the next thing to do. The imp said, uh-huh. I thought, actually, I had not really thought about this. I was obsessed with what I now call the curse of rational incrementalism, thinking about the next step, not thinking about the destination.
Is there a destination, or is it a journey for you? I mean,
destinations generally have a journey involved with them because you're starting somewhere.
Well, but quite often you never get there, do you?
No, but that isn't the point. The question that was asked at the end with Richard, what are you trying to? What does success look like? You've got to work back from the end game to what you want to do, as opposed to that curse of rational incrementalism. So it was that epiphany moment, and it took me about 4 days to think, what did my end stage look like? 3.9 miserable days, but then suddenly, aha, it was obvious. And it's a rather embarrassing thing to say now, but I decided I wanted to become the master of a Cambridge college. Now, the problem with that was I had just about qualified to get a degree when I was at Cambridge, so that rather wiped that one out. But I then set about thinking, well, how do you make that happen? And in my business career, it's been the same thing. So you say, what am I really trying to achieve?
So vision it.
And then absolutely vision it, and then work your path to it, and acknowledge the fact that there'll be many paths to get there. It's not a straight line, it's the wobbly line that I said. But once you start to do that, you know whether you're making progress, and you liberate yourself from that, as I just described it, the curse of rational incrementalism. What am I going to do next? Next is a consequence of something. The destination is the purpose.
Where does failure fit into this? I mean, we heard, we've heard the first presentation has been very much about that journey to the top. I mean, the reality is, for most people's lives, is that it's not as straight-lined as that. There are lots of cul-de-sacs, lots of problems, lots of... What would you say have been your biggest failures, and what have you learned from them?
My biggest failure? I think my biggest failure in the sense of, damn, if only I could have found a better way of making it happen, if that's how one measures a failure, was I worked for a company called Wang Labs, and the chap I worked for, the chairman, I was general manager for Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. It was a dream job. But he was a horrible person. He had no morals. And I've met 3 or 4 people in my extensive life who have no morals. It's a very strange thing to deal with. The late Queen used to say, always look for the good in people, which is a wonderful way of comporting yourself. This man had no good in him. He was a horrible, horrible person. I looked, and it wasn't there. So I had to leave, and I was damned if I was going to leave on his terms. I was going to leave with a bang and not with a whimper. Now, how do you leave doing that? You either get a spectacular new job, and you say, they are screw you, which is quite hard to do when you're in a job, or you do what I tried to do, which is do a management buyout. And my argument to myself was, I do a management buyout of my business. I can say to this bloke, you constantly say my business is rubbish, Europe is a waste of time, and so on. So I said, well, I'll take it off your hands and pay you for it. And if he didn't do that, I'd be fired. So either way around, it would be dramatic. Obviously, I thought, well, never mind anyway, rather like many of my other plans in life, I assumed I was going to win the management buyout. I didn't. He fired me. And being fired, I suddenly lost everything. I lost my income, obviously, lost my self-esteem. It was a horror. On that line I described, it was the worst possible moment. And I had to rebuild.
Can you sort of go back to that moment in your mind and that kind of, I'm presuming you felt sick, did you? Or did you feel, I mean, how did...
Actually, a very odd thing happened. He fired me in his office, which wasn't, as I say, the expected outcome. And we were in America. I was living in... Actually, I just moved back to London, having been working from Brussels. So we just moved back to our house. And he fired me. And an image of my garden at home passed before my eyes. It's the most remarkable thing. So, yeah, at that moment, when actually everything has gone wrong, things will happen to you.
Right. And I can remember speaking with Michael Bloomberg about precisely this point, that he got fired, and that created the fire in his belly to create Bloomberg, the empire. Did that sort of experience in any way fire up, I suppose, the entrepreneur, the person that was going to come? I mean, was there a
Yes.
positive outcome of that?
The short answer is yes, but you don't get short answers, so yes.
But
I was working my sort of gardening leavey stupid thing with this bloke back in London, and I was offered a new job, and I was working for Wang. I got offered this new job at Dun & Bradstreet Software, which is the same job I had with Wang, except I'd be flying to Atlanta once a month instead of Boston. Same car, same salary, same pension rate, so comfort. And my self-esteem started to come back up again. And self-esteem is, as you will all know, but self-esteem is really, really important. When it goes down, it's really hard to cope. And when it's going up, it's really hard to focus on the fact that things are or aren't working properly. Anyway, my self-esteem is somewhere in the bottom quadrant, and I've got a job offer. Woof, self-esteem goes back up again. Suddenly, I'm no longer worried whether people will want to know Ken or Senior Vice President of Wang, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. So it's Ken. So I got this job offer, and I had it in front of me in my office in Wang in London, which in my gardening leave period. I got my pen out to sign it. Imp pops up again. And Imp said, so, you're going to spend the rest of your life working for great companies that someone else has created. I love this Imp has been a pain in the arse over the years. So I punched the Imp, and he just stands there looking at me. And I looked out the window. I thought, you know what? If I'm ever going to have a go at my own business, it has to be now. So I put my pen down. I rang the man I was going to work for and said, look, I'm really sorry. I know we got very close, but I've now decided this isn't for me, and I'm not going to come to you. And he was horrible. He was almost as bad as the chap I'd escaped from in Boston. And I remember I thanked my Imp, because I could have gone to work for this bloke. I would have had to stay with him for 3 or 4 years. Otherwise, I'd look like a job tart moving around all the time. And so I was rescued from awfulness. So self-esteem, I mention that because as an entrepreneur, it follows that curve I was talking about. And you just have to remember that actually you can control your self-esteem. It isn't just an outside phenomenon.
And at the risk of turning this is to into the psychiatrist chair interview, but I mean, this issue about self-esteem, I think a lot of people in the room might identify with that. I mean, I think anybody that has created a business, as you say, will go through moments of extreme self-doubt. They'll go through moments of, oh, I mean, you know, it comes across as statements like, well, I fake it until I make it, and all those sorts of things. But the reality is self-esteem something that time and age and wisdom sorts out, or are there still issues? I mean, how does it work in terms of your life experience?
Right. I think it's always, well, I think actually the curse, another curse, is to not think about your self-esteem. Actually, just to arrogantly move through. And, you know, we see that I have to be careful with my words here, we see that in certain political circumstances, in not necessarily recent times, where people just think they can do anything without any reason to believe, you know,
I think I know who you're talking about now. Go on, yeah.
and then it all goes spectacularly wrong, and I don't know what happens in their heads, and I don't really care. But what I do know is what happens in my heads and the heads of my clients, the people that I now help. So I am a mentor to the companies that I chair. And I was talking to one of my clients yesterday, and he's had a real downer. The reasons don't matter, but it's not, the business isn't going well. And he raised a lot of money, spent most of the money, the business isn't going where it was supposed to go, and the people with the money are blaming him when actually it's their fault because they didn't take up the product that he's produced for them. And he was going down in that, and unfortunately it's really hard to stop that when it's happening. And the job of, in my case, chairman, but Richard's point, the job of a mentor is to help you get back up again, because inside you is the power to do that reversal. And, you know, don't hit the tarmac, come back up again. Don't sit down and eat worms and hope to die and all the other stuff. Just think about how you're going to get out of it. And you'll know this will happen to you all. Someday the accountant will say to you, well, you're out of cash, your business is bust, you're now trading insolvently, you have to close the business down. Ignore them. What you should be hearing is, you're out of money, things are getting really difficult. Get a plan to get your act back together again. Get that self-esteem curve going back up again. And it's inside you. And if you can't do that, then you probably should work for somebody else. If you can do that, just accept it's going to happen. But it will go wrong. And, you know, I mean, it's funny to talk about it now, but I've been fired. That was the only one of the times I've been fired. I've been fired several times by people who clearly find me a pain in the backside because I like to think truth under power. But it doesn't, you know, and it's really upsetting. And, I've had fights, if you ever Google me, in the media with people and so on, who've just been horrible, beasts, really foul people. And of course it affects one. But you know what? You just get up, as your parents would have told you, and fight another day. You have to keep going. That is the spirit of entrepreneurialism. Because you're going to change the world.
Is there also, because I was thinking, you know, some people do reach the conclusion that, you know, this is just not for me, and I don't want to have that sort of responsibility. And is there, and there's no shame in that, by the way, and is there something about how you approach these issues of risk and opportunity, your view about actually risk and how you approach it, mitigate it, manage it, an opportunity and how you pursue it, that sort of, you know, I'm wondering about where those two words actually play out in a successful journey, because we've heard about, you know, the quest for a billion pound valuation business. I mean, those are two of the things that will come up. What's your advice on that in terms of how you confront risk and how you pursue opportunity?
So risk is part of the adrenaline driver for being in business. So if you're in a business with no risk in it, it's probably your dad's business. I mean, you know, you have to, the risk is a given. It's a fact. It's an ever-present fact. So the question that you asked is, how do you deal with risk? Well, the answer is you have to embrace it, because if you deny it or ignore it, it'll get you. So you have to embrace it. But the best way of thinking about it, I think, is you're going on a country walk. You've decided you want to get to the top of a big hill and then back again in time for tea. And off you go, and something happens on the walk. You twist your ankle, the river you will get, the stream you're going to cross has turned into a torrent. You know, there's something, or it's turned into a torrent after you've crossed it and you can't get back. You know, things happen, like it happens in life all the time. You're trying to get here in time this morning for 9 o'clock, you know, and the Bakerloo line is closed. You know, things happen.
You've got to have a plan.
So you have to have a plan. But you have to have a plan so you recognise you're off plan. That's so important. So now you know that unless you do something else, you're not going to get here for 9 o'clock, get home for tea or whatever it happens to be. First step, you don't necessarily pre-plan for that, but you need to have a route so you know you're no longer on plan. And then you have to deal with what you're going to do. Now, I say to my clients, you have a plan to get from A to B to your destination, we call it the landing zone, the place you want to get to. 3 to 5 years out, what do you want your business to look like in terms of value? And you can value it however you want, in money terms or in market share terms or impact on customers or whatever it happens to be. But design a landing zone. 2D model, time going one way, value going that way. You've got your best case and worst case value and best case and worst case time. That gives you a rectangle when you draw the lines from those 2 points. That rectangle is your landing zone. From there on, you're trying to figure out how to get to the landing zone. What's the plan to get there? If you get off it, then you have to get back on the plan. If it becomes impossible, you need a new plan. But the point is, you start to focus to get to the landing zone. Getting to the landing zone, then, is your getting up every day. Am I getting closer or further away from the destination? That's the first bit. But of course, even the plan to get you there to the longest, lowest value is fraught with risk to the point. And I say those are your traps. Those are the things that will stop you getting there. In my experience, there are only 3 or 4, maybe 5 traps for any business. So if you've ever seen a risk register where there are hundreds and hundreds of entries, no, there are 4 or 5 traps. The obvious first one is running out of money. The second obvious one is that you have a dysfunctional organization. The third one is that there's some existential attack from outside by a regulator, competitor or something. Now, underneath those things, there are lots and lots and lots and lots of sublines, sub-risks, if you will. So you can run out of money because you don't sell enough, you don't raise enough, because you're subject to fraud. You know, there are various reasons why you might run out of money. Let's say there are 5, but running out of money is the only thing you care about. You're flying your aeroplane and it's running out of fuel. You don't really care why you're running out of fuel. You have to work out what you're going to do about it. You don't start blaming everybody. You just figure out what you're going to do about it. So the landing zone is really key. And then to get from the lower to the upper of the outcomes, so the longest, or the longer rather, least value route is the lower, the baseline, if you will. To get to the shorter, better solution, I call it the A plan, the ambition plan, then there'll be triggers, 1 or 2 things, either of which will catapult you from the lower to the upper of those 2 lines. And if you've got that in your mind, what are the traps? What are the triggers? Then the whole model, the whole way you think about your business is, am I on track? Has a trap been sprung? Is a trigger presenting itself as an opportunity? And that's how I manage, and my clients manage. And I suppose
the thing has been, you know, obviously everybody here has been through a course which is teaching the rational aspects of this. But a lot of what you're talking about is EQ. It's emotive. It's about understanding. Am I facing a risk here? Am I sort of like seeing an opportunity here? I mean, in terms of how you sharpen that up, is that just experience that gets you better at this?
No, you need the team. And again, Richard said all this, but you need the team. So I say the mad entrepreneur has got to be the person that says we're going to get to the top of the mountain, we're going to do whatever it's going to be. But they need to be supported by calm people, where calm is conservative or maybe careful, analytical, linear-minded people who are going to make sure...
Lock him in the office and walk away.
Well, no, that's spouse. That's a different argument. Spouse is the person that you get home late at night and they say, he or she says to you, yet again, I sent the kids to bed, your food is in the oven, I'm going to bed. And you say, I'm really sorry, I'm actually on a conference call to California, can I speak to you in a minute? That's what they do. No, the calm people are the ones that say, let's think through how we manage all those risks. And I like to remind everybody, the best mission statement in my lifetime, although you're all too young to remember this, is President Kennedy said, we're going to get in the 60s, we're going to get a man on the moon and back again safely by the end of the decade, even though we don't know, we haven't yet invented all the things that need to make that happen. And he did. Oh, he actually was dead. He was assassinated a couple of years into that, but they still made it happen. But the 2 men who stepped onto the moon were supported by 400,000 people in the team back in NASA. So the mad entrepreneur needs the calm team supporters.
But I suppose the mad entrepreneur, I mean, just thinking about the Kennedy moment, I mean that was also inspired by the humiliation of seeing the Russians get into space in the first place, which then led to that.
Yeah.
So quite often there's a deeply emotive urge that begins the journey, and you do in some point in time. I suppose we've been talking about the journey for a lot of this, but let's go on to, you know, the pathway, I suppose, is what we've talked about, but in terms of how you define success and how, you know, how you've defined success, because it strikes me that you define success in a more rounded way than perhaps a really driven, singular entrepreneur that just wants to be judged by the fact of here's the business I've built. You've got many other strings to your bow in terms of the things that you do. Is that just incremental experience, or did you think, actually,
I
want to do a lot of things with my life?
I think it's normal. I think so all the rich people I know, all the entrepreneurs I know who made a ton of money, then start to do things with it, give it away, sponsor things, etc. So I think everybody wants to make, well, not everybody, but all the good people, the only people I care about, want to make the world a better place. I want to make the world a better place. I was interviewed by Billionaire magazine last week, and they said, if you hadn't spent all your time doing all these social justice things, do you think you could have been a billionaire? I think, bugger, you know, wish they'd asked me that 20 years ago, because I could probably then, with that money, done all those things. But my stockbroker, and my last point really, my stockbroker in America rang me one day and said, oh, good news, we just sold some shares in something. I said, whoopee. He said, Ken, you're not really very interested in money, are you? Now, I thought it was really insulting. You know, it's a little bit like saying you've got a small private part. I mean, it's just a really terrible thing to say. So I said, no, of course I'm really interested in money. What an outrageous thing to say. Why do you say that? He said, well, you never ring me. I said, well, I don't need to ring you. You just get on with making money for me. You know, let me know when it's happened. He said, no, Ken, you don't care. I said, I do care. That's an outrageous thing. That's an outrageous thing to say. I said, look, we've just made this money on that particular share sale. I said, you know, so I made the right decision. You've done the right thing, and I'm pleased. Of course, I'm interested in money. And he said, Ken, even blind squirrels find nuts occasionally, and put the phone down. So I have to concede that money hasn't been my driver. Yeah. But I lead a happy life.
But okay, and I think
the imp is under control.
And I think this is some of the things that, you know, a lot of people go into business. Yes, they want to make money. They want to look after their family. They want to do things, look after their teams, and they want to do things in their community. But it strikes me that you did all of those things. And if you look at kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so you found the basics, but then you've gone further because you become a philanthropist. You've got charities which are about giving underrepresented kids the opportunity to go further. You've done lots of things that, you know, some people would say, well, that's far beyond the day job. I mean, at what point did you feel, I'm empowered here to make a difference, and actually maybe that's part of my success formula to actually be that force for change, that force for good?
I came back to the UK after living in America and in Belgium, and I went to a black tie event somewhere in Aldwych, and I came out in the evening, and every shop doorway had somebody sleeping in it. And when I'd gone abroad 6 or 7 years before that, that wasn't the case. So the next day I said to my EA, this is ridiculous. I said, all these people and all these things happening, outrageous, outrageous, outrageous. And she said, well, I know somebody in a homeless charity, and if you want to do something, I'll connect you. So I yeah, damn right I do. So she connects me with this friend of hers, and the friend of hers sent a donation form. So I said to Leslie, who's my PA, I said, what's the problem? I said, I want to do something. I just want to give £5 or £10. He said, well, I'm just a messenger. I'll tell Susan. So she went back to Susan. Susan famously said, tell your boss that in this country, when people say they want to do something, they mean they want to give £10. If he actually wants to do something, then he better come and meet us and see what we can do. And I joined the board of that charity. I eventually became chairman, and the story goes on. And I saw people whose lives were so unbelievably, I mean, their self-esteem was zero. That's the best way to describe it. And we helped them climb back up again and get jobs and do things. And that just works for me. And so that's the Ken driver.
I was quite taken by...
There's a lady there waving a big flag saying, shut up.
Yeah, we've got to... Well, actually, it says here we've got 2.5 minutes, Sibel, so
yeah,
we're going to take our 2 minutes 40, if that's all right. So, not a minute. But if you want us to say... Just
it's quite scary.
I find it, well, yep, we know what success looks like. Okay, right. So, in terms of last question, so I like a form of thinking. It's called appreciative inquiry, right? You know, so an appreciative inquiry is all about forget the problems. We know what they are. Analysis paralysis. You've got to pursue the opportunities.
Yep.
You've got, and actually to do that, you've got to discover them, dream about them, deliver them. And it strikes me that a lot of your life feels in line with that. But if you were to look at the appreciation of the country we live in today, I mean, it strikes me that it's quite a feel-bad world at the moment. It's sort of like, in terms of, you know, I think about when I co-founded Startup Britain, it was on the back of the Olympics. It felt different. There was a mojo about it. In terms of what should an audience think about here that's actually making their way in what looks like a very tough environment in lots of different places, in lots of different ways, lots of different sectors. What's the message, I guess, in terms of that pathway about how you deal with triumph, disaster, and those two imposters.
Well, I think the short answer in the 1.22 seconds we've got left is ignore all that crap and just get on with your business and your intention to change the world for the better. Because it's not as bad as we're told all the time. You know, this the latest industrial strategy in our country is just talk everything down. It's clearly nonsense. I was at an event last night. I'd met two South Koreans. South Korea yesterday agreed to invest enormous amounts of money in our country. I met these two South Koreans and I said, what do you do? And he said, well, I work for a South Korean company. And I said, but what do you do? He said, I also work for a South Korean tech company. So I'm in tech as well. Right, stuff. So I give them my business card. They give me their business card. One's the chairman of Samsung. One's the other chairman of LG. You know what? The world is full of opportunities if you bother to get out and meet people and find things and so on. So I just ignore that crap. Yep. Just get on with it.
So my conclusion is ignore all of that crap, but don't ignore Ken. So Ken Olisa, thank you very much for your conversation with us. Thank you. Excellent job. Okay. And you've got 20 seconds back.
So we've got 20 seconds left.
Cheers.